Welcome back to This Is Live, a Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has restated his call for a permanent seat for Nigeria on the United Nations Security Council, saying that the global organization will recover its relevance only when it reflects the world as it is, not as it was. President Tinubu, in a speech during the ongoing general debate of the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly in New York, read on his behalf by Vice President Keshi, also called for severing debt relief as well as access to trade and financing. Nigeria's demand for a permanent seat at the UN Security Council has been a consistent feature of its foreign policy for decades, with successive administrations arguing that the current structure of the Council does not reflect present global realities, still largely shaped by the outcome of World War II. Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron has officially recognized a Palestinian state at the United Nations, with a wave of Western nations following still in the symbolic move. Macron called for an immediate end to the war in Gaza and the release of all hostages held by Hamas. He, however, stated that France will not open an embassy until a ceasefire is in place and all hostages are freed. The recognition by France, alongside Australia, Britain, Canada, and several European nations, is seen as a step up in diplomatic pressure against Israel. In the meantime, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed not to allow a Palestinian state with his government, calling the recognitions a reward for terrorism. The United States has also criticized the move. In a swift reaction, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu attacked the recognition of a Palestinian state by multiple Western countries during a combative speech at the UN General Assembly. He labeled the recognition moves a mark of shame that sent the message that murdering Jews pays off. Dozens of officials and diplomats staged a walkout as he took to the podium, leaving large parts of the conference hall empty. Outside, protesters against Israel's war in Gaza gathered in Times Square. Israel has come under huge international pressure over its military action in Gaza, culminating in the UK, France, Canada, and other countries recognizing a Palestinian state. Ambassador Joe Keshi is a retired Nigerian diplomat and renowned diplomat. He joins me now to take a close look at positions put forward at UNGA 2025, as well as the political and diplomatic implications of Israel's extended war on the people of Gaza. Thank you, Ambassador Keshi, for joining us on This Is Live, the Sunday Talk Show. Well, I already laid out the territory. Nigeria at UN General Assembly 80th. Your take.
Good evening, Dr. Abati, and always a pleasure to be with you. Yes, I think that it was not only Nigeria that demanded for the reform or the democratization of the United Nations, particularly the Security Council. A number of other speakers did that. This issue has been on the table for the last 20 years. But the problem some of us have with us and the way we make the demand, I mean Nigeria itself, is that the African consensus, which is called the Ezewini Agreement, do not actually agree to any country in Africa having a permanent seat. What they recommended was that Africa should have a permanent seat that should be rotated by African countries. You know, despite the strong negotiation that took place, a number of, particularly the smaller countries like Benin, for example, if I recall, and I think Djibouti, they strongly maintained vehemently, they were opposed to any African big power becoming a permanent member of the Security Council. Rather they said it should be rotational. And I think one or two other continents also had the same problem, particularly I think in Asia, But look, for me, I think what we need to realize is that when we make this demand, we should recognize that we got to present it in a broad and assertive manner like some other African leaders did, in such a way that we are not seen as arrogant, demanding that Nigeria must. No, Nigeria cannot have it on its own, but we have to achieve it in agreement and in consensus and with the help of a number of countries, and of course, based on a number of factors. We've been making this demand, but the truth of the matter is that today, the reality is that nobody, not even the superpowers who hold the seat at the Security Council are discussing this. Once upon a time, some years gone by, Australia used to itemize the issues before the United Nations, and a number of countries tailor their speeches based on that. And I think that, I sincerely hope that, going forward, we can begin to do this. But if we really want the seat, I think we need to do a number of things. Number one, resolve a number of our internal contradictions. Number two, build more friendship around the world, that gives us the kind of command of Africa or leadership that strengthens our leadership of the continent. Because today, if you look at the speeches of the president of South Africa, the president of Kenya, to some extent Ghana, you actually can say that in terms of African leadership, we have very credible competitors today, and they are not too far away from achieving their desire to become the real spokesperson of Africa, contrary to what we used to do, for the continent a few years back. As for the recognition of the Palestinians, for goodness sake, it is the best thing that has happened in the last couple of years. We should have done this, the world should have done this a couple of years ago, but they are doing it today to send a message to Netanyahu in particular, rather than to Israel, that to recognize that, look, Israel is losing friends all over the world. Israel is becoming isolated as a result of the, stubbornness of Netanyahu to listen to anybody and to make peace. The speech he gave at the United Nations was nothing new. It's a rehash of what he has said in the past. He made no concessions. He was actually, very disappointing that after so many years, Netanyahu continues to make the same argument, to make the same boring speech that nobody actually listens to. And walking out, as you pointed out, look, this is not the first time people have walked out of the UN when Netanyahu, comes to the podium. A number of countries have walked out in the past, and they've just repeated it again.
Well, sir, very quickly, after the Ezulini declaration, which was in, I think, Swaziland, right? Swaziland, I think. There was also the Cité declaration, at which African countries were saying, no, they didn't even want one country, that they wanted like 3 permanent seats, and that they would like 5 additional seats on the 15-member Council of the United Nations. But what I would like to ask you is President Trump's speech, in which he was railing against globalism, and he was saying that the United Nations is no longer relevant. Nigeria, in his speech by Vice President Shettima, made a case for multilateralism. It was also the same, defense in Macron's speech, President of France. So multilateralism or isolationism, what do you think is best for the world?
Look, multilateralism is the best for the world. One single country cannot decide the fate of the globe, to start with. But I think the only consolation, if it's a consolation, was, I think, at the end of his speech or somewhere in his speech, Trump also said that the United Nations was safe. You know, I do not know whether that means that they are going to continue to support the United Nations or that he was, as usual, playing to the gallery. The truth of the matter is that it is the major powers that weaken the United Nations. It is the major powers that are responsible for the inability of the United Nations to take critical situation when international peace is violated. It is the major powers, led by the United States, for example, that makes it difficult for the Security Council to be able to function effectively. So they cannot create the problems, more or less strangulate the Security Council from working as initially designed, and then turn around and begin to complain that it is ineffective. No. In the years gone by, they have managed to be very effective in dealing with global crises. But in the last couple of years, as a result of new factors creeping up within the international system, and some countries, particularly immigration, some countries have become, and of course some countries have become very powerful. They now think that they alone can decide the fate of the world. Absolutely no, and it cannot happen, as Trump is learning from his failures in Ukraine, his failures in even in Gaza, his inability to make peace anywhere in the world. Never mind, he claimed that he has made 7 peace agreements, which is not true. So we need to understand that every country in the world should be a participant in protecting the globe. Beyond that, for one country or the other to decide that they alone have the power and the resources to dictate what happens in the world, I think we've come to that reality that it's unacceptable. And that's where the situation is today.
Okay, Ambassador, there's one concern among Nigerians. Some Nigerians are saying it wasn't nice that the president was not there and that he sent the vice president. Is that a breach of protocol? Is that an offense on the part of the president? Because my personal opinion, I think that the vice president, Kashim Shettima, put up a brilliant performance. Is there a problem there?
Absolutely no problem. As I speak to you, in the UN today, a number of foreign ministers are representing their government, and this is their week to speak. Look, let's understand one thing. Even if the president has decided that he was not going to go and is going to send a Keshi to the United Nations, the most important thing that Nigerians should be comfortable with is that Nigeria was represented at the United Nations. Whether the president was there or not, Nigeria was represented at the United Nations in the person of the Vice President of the Republic, and he delivered the president's message, eloquently well. So I've read about this debate. I think it's a confusion. And for goodness sake, Ruben, if you don't mind me saying it, I think this was caused by the lack of understanding of how this thing worked by the media. And they began to make, and some other commentators, and they began to make this, assertion. Yeah, it's good if the president goes. But, there were years in which presidents were not going to the UN at all. It was limited to the level of the vice president and officials. But when, I think under Kofi Annan or somebody, they started these big global conferences on major issues, presidents were required to turn up in New York, during the hunger. So if a president didn't go and the vice president was there, Nigeria was represented. So we look at it from that context that no harm was done, we lost nothing, Nigeria was in New York, and that's the most important thing.
Okay, well, as we begin to wrap up now, I would like you, very briefly, because we're moving to the end of the program, to compare the speech, that is, the Nigerian statement, with the presentations by other African countries, Senegal, Ghana, and other African countries generally. Did we, as Nigeria, qua Nigeria, did we strike the best notes? on debt relief, climate action, and all of those issues, multilateralism, and Nigeria's place in the world. What's your assessment?
You know, we did our best. But in comparison to other speakers from the African continent, and you know, I think that we have to face the reality that we need to do more work in how we draft speeches for our leaders. We have to do more work on understanding the issues that should go before an international international gathering like the United Nations. As I pointed out, you know, our demand for a permanency should have been better framed in a way that, for example, it is not being seen as arrogant when the African demand is not actually for one country to represent Africa, but for, you know, a rotational principle to be observed. You know, beyond that, you know, on this issue of debt relief, I think last time we commented on this. Look, a couple of years ago, the world forgave Africa of its debts, and Africa has gone back again to that same situation, and we are asking for another debt relief. Do you think the world will take us serious on that issue? Look, they are going to say to themselves, we did this for you a couple of years ago, and you guys have been irresponsible in what you've been doing over the couple of years. And in our own case, we take some of these loans, we have no clue. Very few people can actually identify what they were used for. So I just saying that we should look inward. If we get it, it's not bad. Let me just say that there's nothing wrong in getting a loan. Even businessmen all over the world, they go for loans. It is how you use that loan to achieve your objective that is the most important thing. If you take the loan and you are able to pay, that loan, you are expected to pay back. So when you are executing the project, you should also be prepared to understand that from this project, you have to pay back. Where you cannot pay back, and then you go out and begin, particularly when you have mismanaged the fund, and you begin to ask for debt forgiveness, I'm not too sure that anybody will listen to you. And that's why I like the speech of I think the president of Kenya and another president who made it clear that in some extent, the problem is not so much the repayment of these loans, but the high cost of the loans themselves that are given to us by our, you know, by the international monetary agencies and the rest of them. So I think that these are some of the issues that we as a continent should seriously, you know, look into. Okay. Nothing wrong with taking debt, but you must understand that you have to pay back. Pure and simple.
Okay, on that note, I would like to thank you very much, Ambassador Keshi, for joining us on This Is Live, the Sunday Talk Show.